and welcome. I'm Millicent Walker. Tonight, federal government announces issuance of sovereign green bonds. Acting President Osinbajo says initiative will address challenges of energy and environment. South Africa's envoy to Nigeria explains steps taken to halt xenophobic attacks on Nigerians as protesters invade premises of South African firm in Abuja. NNPC Group Managing Director advocates building Nigeria's oil reserves to 40 billion barrels per day by 2020, following rising global demand. And top U.S. government officials visit Mexico to discuss President Trump's new policy on immigrants.
And on business news tonight, Central Bank of Nigeria announces plan to reintroduce charges and deposits and withdrawals nationwide from April the 1st, 2017.
And on sports news tonight, Premier League champions Leicester City sack manager Claudio Ranieri following series of poor results in current season.
And from Abuja, a Lagos High Court sentences man to death by hanging after finding him guilty of murdering his wife.
And we begin in the nation's commercial capital, which hosted an interface between the federal government and its agencies led by the acting president and the debt market community in Lagos. At the heart of the meeting is the plan to make Nigeria the first country in Africa to float a sovereign green bond aimed at addressing some of the country's most challenging issues of energy and the environment. Channel's business editor Bosun Omofaye was at the conference hosted at the Nigerian Stock Exchange and now reports.
Nigeria's acting president, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, was full of commendation for the interministerial cooperation that is working hard to deliver the country's first ever environment-focused debt capital market product called Nigeria Green Bonds. Professor Osinbajo says the federal government is flagging off the climate change bond investment vehicle that will open the way for other private sector issuers in Nigeria.
With the issuance of this green bond, we set a benchmark for ourselves and the wider market and begin to aggregate resources around elements of our economy that seek additional funding. Issuing green bonds are also a tool to support the shift to non-oil-based assets and attract private capital to finance these assets at a challenging time for our economy. Doing this as a sovereign gives us the opportunity to lay strong foundations that serve broader markets to bonds issuance and a pipeline of projects to states.
This Green Bonds initiative looks to address at least two of Nigeria's most difficult challenges of sustainable energy and the environment. Speaking to the global shift to clean energy, the Minister of Power, Works and Housing, Mr. Babatunde Raji Fashola, explains how Nigeria is ramping up on its efforts at achieving the right energy mix to which the new bond will apply.
We now have an energy mix for the country, and that is important. We seek to achieve 30% of renewable energy by the year 2030. Most of that renewable energy will come from solar, it will come from biomass, it will come from all forms of sustainable energy sources that reduces our dependence on first gas, which is very prolific for delivering power, but also gives the country an energy security so that no part of the nation is able to hold the country to ransom in future.
The chief architect of the Nigeria Green Bonds is the outgoing Minister of the Environment, Mrs. Amina Mohammed, and she used this major stakeholders interface to drive home the key points she believes will make investment sense to both local and international investors.
We look to the economic nature of trees. How can we identify the top 10, just as the Ministry of Agriculture looks at some of the commodities from rice to tomatoes to the rest? How do we do that with trees? So that you give people an incentive, not just to plant the tree, but they will gain from it, so they will protect it. And then we can talk about not just stopping the desert, but we can talk about reclaiming, because this happens in plantations.
As the federal government is set to float this unique investment product, Nigeria has taken another step, keeping in line with one of the main talking points of the global community: a clean world with a clean environment, powered by clean energy. Both Xenophobic, Channels Business News.
And Nigeria needs to build her oil reserves up to 40 billion barrels and produce up to 4 million barrels per day by 2020, ahead of the global demand forecast for oil, which is to increase to about 17 million barrels per day by the year 2040. Well, these are part of the submissions made by the Group Managing Director of the NNPC, who was represented at the 14th Annual Arrett Adams Memorial Lecture today in Lagos. The guest speaker highlighted technological advancements and a review of current industry practices as necessary steps to improve oil production.
Blocks have come into production.
Since 2004, the Arrett Adams Memorial Lecture Series have focused on different national issues, particularly discussions around Nigeria's petroleum industry, in an attempt to not just set agenda, but also proffer solutions. The 2017 edition of the lecture is woven around oil production in Nigeria, with the theme, Find More, Produce More.
Considering our quest for revenue generation as a nation, it is given that we need to increase our exploration efforts in order to sustain our reserves base and grow production. Outlook and set targets of building our reserves at least up to 40 billion barrels of oil and production of up to 4 million barrels per day by the year 2020.
Addressing some of the impediments to these set targets means learning from the past.
The lessons will perhaps include government and financial policies, sustainable development, addressing host community agitations, tackling pipeline security, and attitudinal changes.
The lecture generates lots of comments and questions from the audience, some of which include how the NNPC intends to achieve and fund its grandiose projections.
NNPC, in collaboration with its joint venture partners and production sharing contractors, is committed to the evaluation of some deeper potentials by acquiring long offset 3D seismic data for better imagery and maturation as drillable prospects, as a way of funding additional reserves.
While everyone looks forward to seeing NNPC meet its targets, the 14th Arrett Adams Annual Lecture ends with a presentation of postgraduate scholarship awards by the Arrett Adams Foundation to 3 geology students of the University of Ibadan. Yomi Otaigbe reporting for Channels Television News.
Nigeria is asking the South African government to take every step necessary to protect its citizens in the face of renewed wave of xenophobic attacks in that country. Well, this warning was handed down by the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Mrs. Khadijat Abba, at a news conference in Abuja, where she also appealed to Nigerians to be calm as the government is taking steps to address the matter. Well, her appeal followed a protest by Nigerian students at the premises of some South African businesses in Abuja. Meanwhile, the South African High Commissioner to Nigeria, Mr. Lulu Nguni, in response to a summons, has briefed the Nigerian Foreign Affairs Ministry on what is being done by his country to stop the attacks.
An unusual security presence in front of the Abuja main office of the South African telecommunications firm, MTN. These protesters, who are members of the National Association of Nigerian Students, had stormed the office to express their displeasure over the xenophobic attack on Nigerians in South Africa. Protesters also took their grievances to the headquarters of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They gave all South African companies a 48-hour ultimatum to relocate.
The xenophobic disease that started a long time ago has come again. And we have decided as Nigerian students, as the president of NANS, to cure the madness.
The South African High Commissioner to Nigeria was a guest at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where he was summoned to explain the steps being taken to address the attacks on Nigerians.
The police are involved in trying to get to the bottom of this matter. A number of individuals have been arrested for the crimes committed, and we hope that they will face the wrath of justice with regard to what they have done.
The Minister of State for Foreign Affairs read the Riot Act, insisting that the South African authorities must take steps to stop the attacks.
The federal government of Nigeria strongly urges the South African government to take all necessary measures to protect the lives and property of foreigners living and working in South Africa.
As for the protesters, the next action will be on Saturday, February the 25th, when the 48 hours ultimatum expires.
In the meantime, officials from the South African Ministry of Home Affairs say they will be conducting random searches at workplaces to fish out illegal immigrants in the country. Addressing Parliament earlier today, the Home Affairs Minister, Malusi Gigaba, warned that firms would be penalised if they breach the law and that employers should not fuel tensions by playing locals against foreigners. His comments come as foreigners, mainly Nigerians, have become the target of xenophobic attacks in the country, as many unemployed South Africans accuse them of taking their jobs. On Monday, 34 foreign-owned shops were looted in parts of Pretoria. The Nigerian government has condemned the attacks, reaching out to the African Union to intervene. At least 517 Nigerians, including 313 asylum seekers who fled the Boko Haram insurgency in the northeast, have been repatriated, according to the Cameroonian government. The United Nations High Commission for Refugees is reported to be very concerned about the expulsion and is calling on the government of Cameroon to respect international conventions and offer asylum as against the forced repatriations. The UNHCR is planning to sign an agreement with Cameroon and Nigeria next month for the voluntary return of 85,000 Nigerian refugees. Meanwhile, the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, says it is making efforts to get details surrounding the action by the Cameroonian government and the condition of the affected Nigerians. The Cross River State government has confirmed a case of Lassa fever death in the state following a positive test result received from the Institute of Lassa Fever Research and Control in Irua, Edo State. The Commissioner for Health, Dr. Inyang Asibong, who announced this in a statement, adds that the ministry has mandated the epidemiology team to begin contact tracing immediately for effective monitoring. Well, according to her, the personnel at the primary healthcare centres across the state have been asked to watch out for the signs and symptoms of Lassa fever in their patients and report any suspected case to the state's primary healthcare development agency. Well, no election is considered a minor one, and this is why the major political parties in River State are already gearing up for the HA local government election scheduled for Saturday. INEC is warning all participants to ensure that they conduct themselves properly during the exercise. Our correspondent Emmanuel Ire captures the situation ahead of the council poll.
HA, the only local government in River State that is yet to have full representation at the State Assembly and the Federal House of Representatives.
And
the polls have been cancelled here 3 times due to violence. The heavy presence of security operatives underscores the importance of this gathering of officials of the Independent National Electoral Commission, representatives of the political parties, youth groups and other participants. The resident electoral commissioner in the state says this is serious business. Representatives of political parties take turns to make their cases for credible polls in HA.
If elections on Saturday are held without any hinges, without anybody boycotting or subjugating the rules of election, I think everybody in the show will be happy and will be blessed and congratulate ourselves. Let every person, all politicians, let them decide, be it APC, PDP, let everyone decide from it and ask Lord, I'm asking, praying today that let there be peace in this local government.
For this youth leader in the community, HA people will no longer be tools in the hands of politicians.
Allow the polling units to have their result after counting. It is very simple. You cannot win an election when you write an illegal result.
The National Commissioner in charge of Rivers, Edo and Bayelsa is optimistic that things will be done differently.
I have no doubt that it's going to be a better election this time, because the people, we've spoken to the people, and this time even the youths know that their collaboration with INEC and the police will make a success of this election.
A few blocks away, the River State Governor Nyesom Wike is received by traditional rulers and political leaders of Eche, where he calls for a credible exercise.
River State is a peaceful place. Eche is a peaceful land, and we must allow the people to determine who will represent them.
Everyone appears to be on the same page that the elections in Eche will be free of violence. After 3 trials, INEC insists that this time the polls will be concluded. Emmanuel Irei, Channels Television News.
In part 2, after the break, all appears set for the Anambra governorship elections. Join us again.